Oh, this is gonna suck.
I was right. It did suck. But what we're working on in this project is a hybrid of two different things. It is a bench, and it is also a shoe rack. I'll be doing a future video to do the door itself. For now, I'll be working on the bench. I live in a very space-efficient home. That's a nice way of putting it. And my wife has been wanting a better shoe rack. We've actually been using a smaller shoe rack substituted with a can holder. I don't even know what else to call it. It's like one of those things that used to be in every suburban mom's pantry that held just way too many cans. Not this one though. This was more meant for a closet pantry in a tiny apartment in New York. And we didn't know that that's what we were using for about a month until I realized that it fit cans a lot better than it fit shoes. And hey, in my defense, it kind of looks like a shoe rack. Also, shout out to this can's brother. He'll be making an appearance later. What you just saw was the glue up for the top slab. And what you're seeing here is actually the second attempt at the bottom slab. When I first glued up the bottom slab, it ended up so incredibly warped that it just wasn't salvageable. So what I'm doing is cutting it into strips and then laying them in various different directions so that their forces actually cancel each other out. The reason I'm doing this instead of buying new wood is because I don't want to buy new wood. I don't have that much money for this project, and so I was already over budget at this point with materials, so I just decided let's take the creative solution, and honestly, it will probably be just fine. And in the end, I truthfully am very happy with the way that it turned out. I suppose there's a scenario where it didn't pan out very well, and I wouldn't be happy with the way that it turned out, but since the slab ended up being perfectly flat after it was done, I honestly couldn't be more happy. And here's a short clip of me wasting my time before I decided to take it to Woodworker Source and pay them $25 to sand it down for me. And they did a much better job than I would have. If you're watching this right now, I have to thank you, because you're also probably keenly aware that I'm no big maker. I have no following on Instagram or YouTube, but I like to do this in my spare time. Because of that fact, I'm missing many tools that most woodworkers have. And I'm not talking about the big fancy joiners or belt sanders or drum sanders that a lot of woodworkers have on YouTube. I'm talking about the most basic tools. A hand planer. I think that's the irony of the clip I'm showing you right now. I have a laser engraver, but I don't have a hand planer. I don't know how to work that one out for you. To add to it, that wasn't even a cheap engraver. It's industrial, in fact. I'm still struggling to understand why I even own it. But I will say this, that engraver made it doing these rounded corners much easier. For a tambour door, you're supposed to have a track, and in this case both on the top and the bottom, to guide the door around the corners, which is very important, and even though I'm not covering the door in this video, having the track in place for when I do make that door is crucial. In fact, that track was probably the biggest source of headache throughout the course of this project, and as you'll see right now, as I'm doing a repair, one of the reasons for that is because I needed a perfect 3/8 track running the perimeter of the entire top and bottom slab. They needed to match each other perfectly. So that meant when I had, little problems like this, I had to fix them. And even though it didn't necessarily look pretty, at least in this case, since this is the top slab and the track is facing down, it kind of just disappears. And luckily this is not only facing down, but it's on the back side of the bench, which will be against the wall, so I don't necessarily care that there's a big patch here. I'm also not sure I could afford to care that there's a big patch here. Now, if you happen to be aware of a better way to do this that's less noticeable, please let me know. I'm clearly a novice, and any advice is welcome. That being said, I'm also the type of person that just starts things. I don't really care to know the best way to do something before I start something, just because I think that starting often gets in the way of doing. People think that they have to know every in and out of a thing before they attempt it, and I'm just not that person, and I'm grateful I'm not that person. That also means that I tend to be bad at finishing things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the guy that has 100 different projects laying a screw in their backyard. But I feel like when you're good at one thing, you usually are not great at the opposite of that thing. At least that's the way it's been in my life. I'm very good at starting things. Finishing things takes much more focus and effort for me. My ask to you today is that if you happen to be good at something, think of that opposite something and put it down in the comments and mention whether or not you're good at it. I'm just curious what other people think about this concept. Now, obviously, being the opposite of an accountant is kind of hard to specify, but maybe an action sports junkie is the opposite of an accountant. I don't really know. At this point in the process, I've cut everything to size, and I'm attempting to do my dry fit of everything. And it's right about now that I'm learning that my uprights are not straight at all. And what I mean by not straight is that they're actually twisted. And they're such short boards that the fact that there's twisting is concerning. But luckily, the wood I'm working with is just barely pliable enough that I can apply force and get everything into place. I made sure to check each upright in different positions just to see what fit best. And this is the configuration that I ended up with. I made sure to mark the tops and bottoms of everything and the order that they go in so that when I actually go to do my glue up, I have it all in the correct position, or rather the easiest to put together position. And here I am lamenting over just how bad it is.
What did I do?
Some of these uprights were twisted more than others, and that meant that I needed to set up some kind of system to actually pull them into place rather than just using brute force, because that was not working. Hopefully you can tell from my not on purpose Napoleon Dynamite reference, I was very happy when this finally went into place.
Alright, so that took a while. Longer than I think I want it to take. Oh, yeah, and the one thing that's going to be different is I still need to put my backer piece in, and that just might make this whole process a living nightmare. Wish me luck.
I'm using a piece of Baltic birch plywood for the backer and the shelf, and I don't know if you noticed, but there was a couple gross looking, maybe even moldy looking marks on that plywood as I was cutting it. It turns out if you lay a piece of plywood on top of motor oil, it will seep into it. And after what felt like every possible attempt to get it out, not knowing that it was motor oil, I finally realized that it was motor oil and that it was going to be useless in a project like this. That's one of the joys of my workspace, is that it's actually originally a mechanic workspace, and so I have it set up for that. And I've got these shop style pieces of carpet that at some point motor oil spilled on, and I had laid the piece of plywood on it for a few days, just not even thinking about it, because I probably spilled that motor oil over a year ago, but oil's persistent. And it just turned into this big mystery for months until it finally dawned on me, as any piece of wood I would put on it would stain. Now, speaking of stain, what I'm actually doing here is I was letting the sun remove all of the green from the poplar. Aside from poplar being not a very hard wood, and several other reasons, green is one of the reasons that many people choose not to use poplar. Poplar usually comes with this green, kind of nasty hue that a lot of people just don't want to deal with. Now, I don't know what the technical term is, but if you leave poplar outside for even just a couple hours, that green hue will turn into a very nice brown color. So nice, in fact, that a lot of people have no idea that the wood is poplar. I'm positive that this is a well-known woodworking thing. I simply found it on my own, and I felt like a genius. However, upon some Reddit research, I discovered that most people happen to know about this. I guess it's called UV staining or something like that. And that's not to be mistaken as the new UV stains that people like Blacktail Studios use on a regular basis. But for poplar, it simply turns green to brown.
This started off as a can of black beans and actually made its way into my dinner the other night. But with the help of some 3M glue and some 80 grit sandpaper, I've ended up with this, which is gonna help me smooth out the corners. So this is malleable enough that I'm able to match the radius on my corners, but it has a nice hard edge so that I can actually get down to the bottom.
The reason that that little piece was necessary is because after applying the finish over the UV stain, I ended up with a little bit of excess finish within the track and inside of the mortises. I'm not really sure I can call them that, but that's what I'm going to call them for lack of a better term. Using a very small piece of wood that matches the bottom of what each of the tambour pieces will be, I'm able to make sure that this entire track is smooth and will fit the door. I guess my only hesitance is that, can it be called a mortise and tenon if the piece itself is a tenon? Like, I haven't cut those uprights down at all. They just go straight into that piece. Somebody educate me in the comments, because I genuinely don't know. And if it isn't a tenon, at what point does it become a tenon? Because I'm shaving like a 64th of an inch off right here. Would that make it a tenon? I'm clearly overthinking this, so whoever knows, please just leave it in the comments so that I can put this to rest. I went on to do this style sanding for the next 45 minutes or so, thinking that it was the best option, until I realized that I could just use my orbital sander to do it, and then I had already done 3 of the pieces at that point, and the last piece took me all of 2.5 minutes. And now that all the pieces are ready, it's time to glue up.
I am truly so stressed right now. Oh, jeez. Alright, Ted, let's do this.
If you're wondering why I'm so stressed about this glue up, for some context, this is actually about 6 months in to a project that I was expecting to do on a single weekend. Obviously, I wasn't working that entire time. This was supposed to be a Christmas present. I'm currently doing this voiceover in June. I did not make it on time. Now, my wife claims that she doesn't mind, but I still feel bad. This was supposed to be a Christmas present, and it has been 6 months. So, Merry Christmas to my wife in June. If you've stopped paying attention at this point because of the puppy in the bottom left, I completely understand. I would do the same. His name is Teddy. He's currently 4.5 months old. At the time of filming this, he was probably 3 months old. I'm not really sure. My time is so skewed on this project. But he is adorable regardless of how old he is. He is still incredibly adorable. And if you don't think so, that's your loss. If you think back to a few minutes earlier in the video, as I voiced some of my concerns about doing this glue up, it potentially being a living nightmare, I'm about to encounter that portion.
A little bit more. Oh, this is gonna suck.
The reason this portion was so rough was because I hadn't dry fit this piece with the backer in. I kind of just decided to go for it. Like I said, I'm really good at starting things, not so good at seeing them through, sometimes. Hold that thought, there's an adorable puppy on screen.
Yeah. Hey, dude. Hey.
Like I was saying though, I didn't have much of a choice at this point. either I got it to fit together or I was going to end up with a mess on my hands. Luckily here, as it finally clicked into place and that clamp fell off, the bench was finally together. And all that's left to do is to clamp it real tight and let it sit. Once dry, this part was incredibly satisfying. During the glue up process, I did end up with a couple gaps that I wasn't anticipating, and I ended up with a few more spots that I needed to patch. What I'm doing here is creating a small, thin, rectangular piece that I can fit into a very small hole at the front of the uprights. There was more than one of these. In fact, I think it happened on 3 of them. So if you feel like you're being gypped, just rewind about 20 seconds and play it 2 more times. As I mentioned before, I'm severely lacking in the woodworking tools department, and these are basically just Harbor Freight chisels and a super cheap sharpener to get the job done. They're not great, but they work for now. Again, not the most beautiful patch, but being right at the corner from a distance, it's kind of hard to notice. All that's really left at this point is to put the legs on and install the shelf. I decided to go with 8 legs, which I know is overkill, but these weren't super strong legs, and I didn't want to chance busting one of them, so I just added extra for good measure. It did make leveling the entire thing a little bit harder, but once I had it in place, it's done. I don't really need to worry about it. As is always the case, I would hope that you do not crucify me for using screws. These are very weak screws. And at this point, I'm done. Here's the final shots after we put it to use for a week or so. It's pretty. It does its job really well. I still need to do the final door. And just as I feared, it turned into exactly what I didn't want, which is a table for clutter. But, you know, that's life.
There is so much that I don't even know that I need to improve on. But if you enjoyed this content even a little bit, I'm bound to improve from here. This is only the first of many that I plan to post. And if you have it in you, if you would consider subscribing, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for watching.